Thank you. Thank you, Guan Singh, and also Summer School for having me here, inviting me and giving the opportunity to respond to Professor Nandi's presentation. And the presentation itself speaks directly to my own experience. I've been involved in a large oral history project in Indonesia, which collects interviews with hundreds of people, former radical activists in the 1960s who were later imprisoned under the New Order regime. Some or many of them were in prison for 14 years without trial, so they have a lot of these disheartening stories about their experience during that period. And what we did was to collect initially only stories about their sufferings. And that was the intention, to complete or to collect additional information in order to construct an alternative version of history. So on one hand you have the official version, which says that the events in 1965 on October 1st was a communist plot, and the New Order came to rescue the Indonesian people from communism. In a similar vein, I think here, if you remember, the events of February 28, 1947, which starts a long period of authoritarian rule in Taiwan. A bit of the history first before I continue. So on October 1st, in 1965, 6 army generals were abducted from their homes and later killed. The army version was that they were killed by soldiers who were under the influence of Indonesian communists. Basically, they will say that they were abducted and the communists are responsible for that, and that's why we have to retaliate against the communists and then wipe them out of the political stage altogether. So the campaign against the communists started in October 1965 and lasted for 3 years at least, during which more than 500,000 people were killed, tens of thousands were imprisoned, scattered all around Indonesia. Many of them stayed in prison until 1998. Many of them died in prison, and it also affected like millions of their families. So children of these communists or alleged communists were difficult to find jobs, and all these problems. So this is a bit of the history. So the initial aim of the oral history project was to provide alternative sources for historians to write more inclusive histories. So while before the official history excluded all of these little stories about experience of suffering, now we want to include that and try to bring it to schools so students in schools would get some knowledge about what happened in the past. Because it was huge. I mean, in terms of the impact that it has, it was similar to the Cambodian massacre. But while everyone, at least in the West, there was a lot of protest against the Cambodian massacre, nothing was heard about the Indonesian massacre. So this is what we want to restore, the historical records, so that a lot of other people, younger Indonesians, would be able to know a bit about their own history. So it was also meant to represent the voices of the victims against the deliberate strategy of silencing by the regime. So it started with what Professor Nandi refers to a lofty and venerable goal indeed. But we soon found out that the issue was much more complicated than simply providing an alternative to the state narrative. The first problem was around the issue of what and who to record, by whom and for what purpose. When you began the whole project, it was simple. You find the victims who was imprisoned go and interview whatever experience they have, put it on record, and then you have the source. But as soon as we began that process, we noticed that this was not easy. It's easier thought than done. Because once you enter the house of a victim and their families, all the complicated situation will come forward. Like the son may not like his father or mother to be interviewed. And there are cases where fathers actually hid their identity from their children for many, many years. So it was much more than simply digging into the past, getting information and put it on record. No? It involves a very complex set of social relationships as well. So that was the first set of problem. Yeah? And it also challenged our notion, our understanding of relatively stable notions of human rights. What constitute human rights violations? For example, if we say that this or that person was killed by the state, it is clearly a violation of human rights, the very basic rights to life. But how about the widows of these people who were not able to raise their 5 kids by themselves under constant intimidation, repression for many, many years, and they suffered a lot. But this was not in the category of human rights violation. If you use Euridocs, you will not find it. And there are hundreds of detailed categories of human rights violations. It doesn't exist. So we have to find the solution to the problem somewhere else. It's not in human rights, it's not in the standard conventional writing of history. You have to find it somewhere else. So this is one of the issues that we confronted from the very beginning of the project, and it's still going on. Debate is still going on. The deeper you go, the more you will find and the more you will realize that this is a very complex situation that you are dealing with. And there is the limitation of languages, the limitation of conceptual framework, concepts, etc., etc. There's, I think, Professor Nandi has raised and addressed very eloquently. Another example is the whole question about who is a victim and the idea of victimhood itself. It has been contested, especially when it comes to issue of reparation and compensation. This is another, the economics of victimhood. It's also a very complex issue, especially now, when there are possibilities that the violent past can be addressed by the state. So once that comes up, then all these issues about, I was a victim too, and all these claims made by different groups and different situations will emerge. And this is also a situation where and it's clear, I mean, it's not only in Indonesia, I think it happened in Rwanda, it happened in all different situations and societies who endured severe human rights violations. They have similar issues as well. The conclusion is that we had at that time is that the conceptual framework is insufficient to handle this experience. Memory of the victims is not singular and should not be treated so. New set of concepts and language to deal with the complex of experience, fears, and memories were needed. The second set of problems is about knowledge production. So once you have all this information about what happened in the past, what are you going to do with it? Yeah. We have published a book, a collection of essays based on those oral interviews about different aspects of the violence, etc., etc. Some other people have done excellent academic work on all these different aspects. Have written books about prison, about the experience of torture, etc. And of course, the noble idea behind these projects was, of course, to inform people who did not experience the 1960s or that period about what happened. But it soon also became clear that that was problematic too. It was very helpful in bringing repressed narratives back into historical writing and challenge the official history of the regime. But it also has limitations because of its focus on challenging the dominant, which absorbs the oral history into that framework, while ignoring the possibility and the need to create what Professor Nandi calls the separate, private, and secret ledger on which the communities write their sufferings. So once you collect all this information, this is interesting during the interaction that I had with some of these people, as that what are you going to do? Are you going to publish this? And if you do publish it, what is going to happen to them? Will it go through a legal process? So all these expectations, hopes, and during this process makes us realize that there cannot be a single sort of way of dealing with this issue. You need diverse tactics, strategies, and also methods of dealing with this. And this is not only an ethical question of doing justice to repressed narratives, it also has theoretical and political consequences. Professor Nandi here raised the issue of mnemonic knowledge in the construction of histories. What oral history does at its best is to select useful information from interviews or to tune memories into objects of study as social phenomena, of which the Italian Alessandro Portelli is a great example. His study about the death of Luigi Trastelli is very excellent in this regard. In official history, of course, all these memories would be abandoned altogether. No? There's no place for them. Professor Nandi suggests that we need new categories and concepts because the dominant protocols of knowledge and reasoning have no access to that kind of knowledge. So we need something else. Academic work itself is limited. Psychoanalysis may help you to make the first steps, but then you have a lot of range of other issues to grapple with. But this means not simply to have sharper analytical tools to separate useful from useless information, but to create a conceptual framework that would be able to deal with different, contradictory memories as a dynamic whole, as opposed to this location notion of totality, as a dynamic whole, as a whole, but not totality that would reduce the experience to a singular idea. Professor Nandi then refers to Freudian psychoanalysis, particularly the idea of dream work, and looks at the possibility of employing the methods of analyzing and understanding individual dreams in the study of memory of communities into what he calls memory work. So you have dream work for individuals and you have memory work for these communities. And like Freud's dream workers, these are people who study dreams. Yeah? Like these dream workers, the memory workers here observes different signs of memory in a community. Could be oral interview, could be visual objects, or sounds, etc. And this is the important point, interacts with the community instead of simply telling the people this is what happened and you can take the lessons from the past. So you interact, like the dream workers interact with the people who have dreams, the memory workers interact with the people or the community that has this memory. And this is the major difference between memory workers and professional historians, so to say. The historians will take all the information, write it on his desk, publish a book, and forget about it. Yeah? Or make a career, probably, out of it, if he's lucky. In my own experience, this is where the historian or scholar is encouraged to collaborate with art and activism. There have been numerous of such projects in Asia. And this is a great example. Yeah, the map. What is it called again? The map of here. The incarceration map of Taipei. Yeah, we actually made a similar map in the city of Solo. So you have different, similar projects all over Asia. Yeah, and not necessarily providing simple information, this is what happened, but also to invite people to get engaged with all these issues. And I think art and activism here is important because they have that kind of language that scholarly, what you call that, endeavors do not have, where the limitations of the scholarly and academic work are actually overcome. Yeah, in fact, it has been sort of a trend now to work with memory, like different projects of artists dealing or taking up the issue of memory, either installation, graphic design, and a lot of them with photography, working with photography. So it has been a trend, and you have also documentary, feature films, and so on. Like many of them now are dealing with the issue of memory. So while the collaboration has been productive for art and activism, it has, on the other hand, raised serious questions for historians or for scholars in the humanities. Is the study of memory possible at all? If that's the case, if it's that complicated, no? Is it possible to conduct the study of memory? Because it's so elusive, it's so difficult to grapple. Yeah? The language is very limited. Our conceptual framework, once it's established, then you have like a new phenomena coming up. And you are sort of trying to catch up with these developments. Yeah, you're trying to catch up with all these developments, and you, in many cases, actually fail. So is the study of memory possible at all? Or better, is it desirable? Do we want to make memory as an object of studies? Is this the best way to deal with that? Or are they more, or should we find like more diverse, collaborative attempts involving people from different backgrounds? For example, for historians, now you have like numerous journals devoted solely on the issue of memory. Psychology, history, anthropology, and humanities in general, area studies, etc. So what would be the best way to deal with this issue? This is a question that I raised to all of us. We have to think about it. Because what a study does is to capture a social and cultural phenomenon and present it in comprehensible terms, while memory work clearly goes further by interacting with the subject. Not only does this require a new set of concepts in order to capture the phenomenon better, but also new ways of placing the results of our study or our knowledge within a new set of social relationships. The rapid development of digital culture makes this task even more exciting, as it provides new ways of interacting. Yeah. Authoritative and official histories are increasingly getting irrelevant, and history and memory has been somewhat democratized. But there are new challenges now. Authoritative and official history are themselves based on the memory of the dominant group, while the status of their memories as official history has been undermined. It does not mean that their memories have been evaporated. The dominant is in fact reproduced by the excluded now. In the last few days, we have heard horrible news from Gaza, Palestine. Before I came here, I participated in a rally to support the Palestinian people. Not from our place was another rally, organized by an Islamist group and attended by the notorious presidential candidate, Prabowo Subianto, and people carrying flags of the equally notorious ISIS, yeah, the Syrian Iraqi Islamic State, which hit the news with their attack on Mecca. If nobody stops them, then they will arrive very soon. So their speeches were full of hate against Jews, stories about how Muslims have been repressed, etc. This is also a memory. Yeah. And they have this like separate, private, autonomous realm, yeah, where they cultivated these memories, yeah, in order to sort of build their movement. The whole movement is based on that. And the language is a language of hate and vengeance. They called for sending militias to the Middle East. Our rally was quite different. or very different in a sense. It was much more open, people from different religious groups attending, anti-globalization activists, street artists, people of different sorts. It was also colorful, a lot of singing, yeah. No dancing because it was fasting month. So, but we also condemned the bombing of Gaza by the Israeli state. We were also horrified. But there was no plans for sending any mission to the Middle East. We mobilized funds, but for educating more people in Indonesia so more people would know what is going on in Palestine. And here, we are employing the logic of interaction. Similar to Zapatista, Professor Nandi mentioned about the Zapatistas, their concept of solidarity, which is the best way to help the struggle of others is to wage your struggle at home. Because, and this is what we claimed in the rally, because after all of us are Palestinians. And this is the idea. If you go back to look at the memory and how to deal with that, the best way, I think, and is not to sort of help them to restore their memory, but to make this memory as part of your own. Yeah. So we are not doing that because we want other people to know, because we are part of that precise same history, although it happened somewhere else. As I said, we are all Palestinians. Thank you.